In conversation with Chris Morehouse. Chris Morehouse holds a master's in public and international affairs from the University of Pittsburgh, where he focused on economic and social development in Africa. He has long admired the way that African proverbs encapsulate profound wisdom in vivid ways. Legacy for all, African proverbs often accord with Judeo-Christian teaching. He served as a deacon at Shepherdstown Presbyterian Church in Shepherdstown, West Virginia, where he lives with his family. And on today's episode of Auto Interview, it's my utmost pleasure and joy to have on the show today Chris Morehouse. Welcome on the show, Chris.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show too. I'm excited we're going to be talking about your book.
Glad to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation.
It's my pleasure. Yeah. So, Chris, I would first say that, reading the description page of your book was quite intriguing to me. The insight and your exploration of the subject of Christianity, African tradition, and proverbs, it's very illustrative and quite enthralling to me. And I'm curious to ask you, what inspired the making of legacy, wisdom of African traditions and the Bible? How does this book come about?
Thank you so much. Well, as you said, I went to the graduate school at the University of Pittsburgh, where I intended I prepared for a career in international development with a focus on Africa. And there I met people from Nigeria and Mali and Tanzania, and it opened up a new world for me. And I at that time I began collecting books of African proverbs, and they've stayed with us every single move. And I'd go and I'd pick them out occasionally, and I'd look up the proverbs. Even before that, though, I was reaching for the Time Life volume on African kingdoms for my parents' bookshelf. And when I was about 12 or 13, I ordered a Teach Yourself Swahili on a set on records. So I've had this interest for a long time, but it really blossomed when I was a young adult in grad school, and my life took a different turn. That's fine. I'm grateful for that. But I've always had this interest. And about 7 or 8 years ago, I came across a series of books, The Parallel Sayings of Jesus and Muhammad, Buddha, Lao Tzu, etc., looking at the great faith traditions and looking for comparing similar verses, for compassion, for example, for wisdom. And I don't know if you have these in Nigeria, but there are posters that show the golden rule across the great faith traditions. Right, do unto others. And it just always bothered me that why isn't there a volume in this series on Africa? Now, granted, Africa has many different traditions. It's not a single one. It's many different religions. Proverbs by themselves are not a religion, don't constitute a religion, but they provide insights that can guide your life, and they embed in your soul the way religion at its best does as well. And I just thought, this really should exist. I looked around, and there really wasn't a similar kind of volume. I mean, there are lots of books on African religions. There are books on the integration of Christian faith and indigenous belief and different in practice. But there's nothing quite like this, comparing the traditions of Africa in looking for common ground. And it just occurred to me, this is worth exploring. This is worth knowing. I mean, the proverbs themselves, because they originate from oral cultures predominantly. I mean, all cultures have them, but in Africa, they're really an art form. I mean, I'm sure there are a proverb a day websites that you can subscribe to, but they're meant to be vivid. They're meant to be easy to remember. And their use of simile and metaphor and paradox is really, really beautiful. And it just occurred to me, I'm not from these traditions, but this is worth exploring. And
Yeah.
there's a lot more common ground than you might expect.
Wow, that's quite amazing. And I like the fact that you mentioned that it's worth exploring. And it is truly worth exploring because there are quite a lot of African proverbs, even in Nigeria, particularly in Nigeria itself. There are a lot of Nigerian African proverbs, not to mention of other African countries coming together, exploring on other proverbs. In Nigeria alone, in the southwestern and southeastern part where my dad came from, there are quite a lot of proverbs. And if you've read some of the prestigious writers that we have here from here, like the likes of Chinua Achebe, you see the use of African proverbs in their literature while talking in communication, even from their characters, conversation, and all of that. So yeah, it's an amazing thing to explore, and that's one of the reasons I was quite surprised when I saw that your book expanded this theme. I was like, oh wow, interesting to even have a Westerner doing this. It's awesome, really.
Well, Peter, I had African collaborators.
Oh.
When I started the book, I was like, this is really great. I really I need to do a little bit more exploration.
Mm,
So I went on a task-based platform and asked for help, not from every tradition in the book, but from major ones.
mm,
Um, and I asked, is this really a proverb in your culture?
mm,
Um, if so, how is it used? What's the context? For example, is it used with children? And then are there issues of translation that would really enrich our understanding of English? And I've got
mm,
such an outpouring of responses and people who thought this is really great. This is wonderful.
mm.
And point where I this for the major the larger cultures in the book. I accepted more than one collaborator for different perspectives,
Wow.
a mix of men and women, and they were wonderful. They became true collaborators. So,
Wow.
again, there's more work to be done to validate some of them, but I'm reasonably confident. Yeah, they've corroborated the proverbs. I've taken out the ones they said, no, I don't recognize that. I don't know that's not a proverb in our culture. So there's some
Yeah.
improvement over previous compilations of African proverbs, like the books that I had.
Wow. Wow, that's quite amazing to know, really. I love the fact that you mentioned this. Thank you so much for sharing. And now, for readers who haven't read the book yet, and of course, without giving much information away, could we have a sneak of what we'd expect, perhaps in terms of themes picking up, wisdom of African traditions and the Bible? And I would love you to talk based on this theme, the Bible, as attached to your title.
Absolutely. I can talk about this all day long. So uh, I mentioned the golden rule, do unto others. And I'm sure I missed a few, but I found at least 7 examples of the golden rule across different African traditions. Um, One is from Madagascar. If you know what hurts yourself, you know what hurts others. And my Malagasy collaborator said, yes, that is used with children. And the
Wow.
word hurt in English in Malagasy means pinch. And
Mm,
I don't know about you, but I hear a mother's voice in that. Don't pinch. Don't
mm,
don't pinch. You know what it feels like to be pinched. It's due unto others, but so it's a legacy in that it's passed on to children.
absolutely.
Other examples are from the Swahili from East Africa, treat your
Mm,
neighbor justly and honestly.
Swahili.
The Twi of Ghana in West Africa, what you do not like, do not do unto your neighbor.
Mm,
So there's a lot more common ground than you might expect. There's a beautiful proverb from the Obambo of Namibia.
wow.
Eyes see me too.
Wow.
See me too, which is precisely what Jesus asks us to do in, removing the beam from our own eye, not fixating on the mote in someone else's. See me too, not just the others. It's just a different idiom, a different language, a different way of expressing it. It's very striking. It's an imperative command to your own body.
Mm,
Notice me, notice. And what strikes me is there's this incredible humility
mm,
in that. Look inward, look at myself, which is the basis of any kind of growth or spiritual development. It's some humility and some modesty, and you see that over and over again in the Proverbs.
mm.
And in fact, you tell me I didn't have an Ebo collaborator. I didn't have an Ebo collaborator, but I'm told an Ebo version of Eyes See Me Too is you cannot point an accusing finger without leaving four directed at yourself.
Mm. Wow.
It's
Wow.
the same insight. It's look at yourself. It's the
Yeah.
same impulse.
Yeah.
And there's an American writer, Brian McLaren, who writes about religion, who says once you've begun to identify a similar teaching in another tradition,
Mm-mm.
you've begun to build a bridge. And I think the
Wow.
future of religious dialogue is more and more bridge building. We're seeing, when that fails, when it doesn't work, but we need to be listening to each other. And you could also, gain a better appreciation of your own tradition.
Mm,
Sometimes, the Bible verses, we hear them so often, we take them for granted,
mm.
right? And so when we hear it express the same idea expressed from a different culture, it gives us the opportunity to reflect again and
Yeah.
understand again. Oh, that is what that means.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's quite amazing to know, really. I love the fact that you keep exploring and mentioning this. I love it so much. And now, I'm curious to know if you experienced any challenges in the process of writing this book. If there is any, could you share with us what challenge it is and how you ultimately overcame it? Also, how do you handle criticism as a writer, especially the negative ones?
Thank you so much. I had some challenges, but one of the challenges with having I had about 30 African collaborators from all different cultures from all over the continent,
Hmm.
and they were so enthusiastic and so generous. There was a
Wow.
deep generosity in their partnership that they said, here's some more proverbs that fit this theme. Here, from my culture, here are some more
Yeah.
Bible verses that we think would work here. But my publisher had an original content requirement,
Mm,
so for every word that was quoted, whether a proverb or a verse, I had to have three original words. So I couldn't
wow.
accept all of their wonderful suggestions because when the whole premise of the book is, quoted verses and quoted proverbs,
Mm,
you know, I, it was kind of a writing challenge, especially because, I wanted to let the proverbs speak.
mm,
I didn't want to get in the way of them and overwrite. Each of these, there are 46 different themes in the book, from, as I said,
wow.
golden rule to seeing, speaking, and listening, greed, generosity, and entire like books, libraries have been written on each of those things.
Mm,
So I'll offer my reflection. I wrote little essays for each of the 46, but I didn't want to. I wanted to make the writing as brief as possible
mm,
and as powerful as possible, like a proverb.
wow.
I don't know if I've achieved that, but that was my goal. So
Wow.
that was the big challenge. And as far as I haven't had any negative reaction yet. I really
That's,
most I've received very, very positive and warm responses from across a range of American
wow.
readers. I'd love to have responses from African readers
Africa.
to see. I went to a festival in July in North Carolina, and there was a scientist who came to me and said, he sat at the table where we were discussing the book, and he said, don't take this the wrong way, but doesn't it seem as that these are just common to all cultures and all traditions? Yes, that's the point.
It's true.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Africans have not always been recognized even for that.
Yeah.
Right. Right. So it's a way to elevate. Look, there's this rich treasury of wisdom that you can learn from, that can inspire you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love the fact that you mentioned this. And there's a lot of wisdom imbibed in African proverbs. There are some that these elderly people will tell you, and you start thinking over and over again. In their dialect, they would say it, not even in
Yes.
English, because sometimes you might want to interpret it to English. But once they speak those proverbs in their dialect, it will cause you to think over and over again. That's true. That's really
Right.
amazing.
Right. It gives you an opportunity to reflect, think a little bit more
Yeah.
deeply, and they embed in your soul over time. They just start becoming, your worldview, your reference point, your touchstone.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wow. Wow. Thank you so much, Chris, for sharing about this. It sounds very amazing and quite pulling to me. And now, apart from legacy, wisdom of African traditions and the Bible, do you have any other works you've authored or maybe currently working on?
No, but what I would future projects, if I have any, I would love to translate this book into other languages.
That'd be great.
I studied French in school. French is one of the major official languages of Africa. So I enlisted French language reviewers for a French translation that's about 2/3 done. And Portuguese too. I got really grandiose because Angola, Mozambique, Cape Verde, Guinea-Bissau, and then also Spanish because of the New World diaspora, the people of African descent in Central and South America, and I obtained the help of for Portuguese a Brazilian of African descent, and for Spanish an Afro-Mexican lady who was wonderful and gracious, and all of them said, "There's nothing like this in our culture. There's nothing like this available on the market right now in our countries." So again, across the Western world, this is an overlooked but rich source of wisdom that we could learn from.
Wow.
So I would love to just the translation is about 2/3 done. So, I'm going to keep at it.
Wow. Well, that's quite lovely and very amazing to know. That's very amazing to know. And now, Chris, was there anything you wish you had been able to include in the book that, bypassed it? Would you like to talk about that?
Well, again, there were cultures I like. There are no proverbs from the House of People. There are no proverbs from the Falasha of Ethiopia. I looked, I tried, but it does include some new world diaspora, communities. It's some proverbs from Jamaica, Guyana, Haiti, and I had some lovely collaborators from Haiti. So there are potentially other themes I could have included, but I just thought, I want to get this out now. I want to get this going, and perhaps there will be a second edition in the future where I can build on this.
Wow.
But you could do something because like each of the traditions is rich enough that you could do something like that, probably limited to one culture.
Yeah.
But I wanted to show Americans, especially, look, there's a continent of wisdom available to you.
Wow.
So yeah, I was really, really ambitious, but
Wow. Wow, that's quite lovely. You see, I love the take and I love the sound of your book. It sounds very amazing and quite pulling to me. Very amazing. And now, can you talk about the reactions you've had since the book was published? And also, okay. Let's go with the first one. Can you talk about the reactions you've had since it was published?
I've presented this several times, and I've one of the responses was, "Wow, we didn't know uh, that there was so much.
Mm,
This could be very useful to us." And one was, "Wow, I didn't know about this, and I think you should go to Africa." And
mm,
I'm like, I would love to, but I think the people who need to hear about this are in this country and in
wow,
France and in Portugal.
wow.
You know what I mean? I think there's been a discounting, of other sources of wisdom that, you know, uh, to our benefit, we could again, as I've said before, we could learn from.
Yeah.
You know, it's a shame that we've overlooked that. So I'm just saying,
Mm.
let's pay attention. So, but the reactions have been really, really positive. I keep waiting for the hate mail. I
Wow.
haven't. I've had some people warn me. Not everybody's going to like this, but I haven't had any yet. Perhaps the critics are being too polite, but I've had people from different backgrounds. South Asian people. You
Wow.
know, Americans of all different backgrounds. Like, oh,
Interesting.
I didn't know about this, and
Wow.
that makes me very, very happy. I think
Mm.
I've achieved my goal there. I
Yeah.
and one thing to know, one thing to keep in mind is that in enlisting all my African collaborators, some of them cited special resources that they had access to. Like, several said, "Oh, I can check the National Library." I'm like, great.
Wow.
Once, at least one said, "I have access to a royal family," and
Wow.
one said, right, and one lady said, "I have access to rural women."
Wow.
All of these are keepers of the knowledge. So it's like, great, you're in. Help. So, I did my best to sort of, and I cite them in the books, like, up front and then throughout. I share their observations about the proverbs. So it really is a collaboration.
Mm.
I'm
Wow.
just sort of, yeah.
That's quite amazing to know, really. I
Did
love your take
now,
on that.
now, Peter, I sent you an ebook. Did you have time to look at it?
I haven't looked at it yet, actually.
Okay. Well, I wanted to ask you what impressions you had about the book.
Yeah, because the first, like I mentioned earlier on, and I think you laughed to it, I was quite surprised that when I saw the first, when I saw the title and I read to the description page on Amazon via the link you said, then I was like, African proverbs, okay, from a white man, okay, what's this all about? What was it talking about? Then I think you mentioned when I read further, I was like, sounds interesting, really. What what would they have inside there? How did he know? How did he know about, African proverbs per se? And what kind of proverbs will be included in this book? Would I find one that I'll be, familiar with? Will I ever find one that I've heard before? Stuff like that. And sorry to this. Coming back to your answer to the other question, I was going to ask you, how do you come about your collaborators? How do you find them? Like, I don't know, how did you come about them? Do you
It
know
was
one another before? Is it from a conference, etc.? How did you find your collaborators? I'm curious.
I posted a task on a gig work platform,
Oh,
and I specifically said, yes, I'd like people to respond from this
wow.
country or these countries.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so I had, like, just dozens of people, for most countries, up
Wow.
to 30 for one task. And so, and there were folks I couldn't choose all of them. I really
Wow.
wanted to. There's a lot of because they responded with enthusiasm, and this is really exciting that you're doing this. Yes, I'd love to help.
Yeah. And
Um,
yeah, that was my, that was my feeling. That was how I felt the first time when I saw the link. It's always amazing to see. I wouldn't sorry to use the word outsider, write about Africa. Like there's sometimes when I was going through Amazon, I was looking for books about Boko Haram insurgency, and I found quite a
Uh,
lot written from the perspective of white authors. And I was like, these people are writing about Nigeria. What is happening in South, in the northern part of Nigeria? And sorry to say, what are my fellow people doing here? Like, it's amazing to have someone outside writing about your own country. Sometimes it's actually
yeah.
intriguing, really, but at the same time, it's surprising. And sometimes it might want to get you curious to want to check the book, at least to hear from their own perspective, to hear from their own point of view, and see if there's a way you can criticize it. if you, and see if there's a way you can criticize the writing. If they tend to make any mistakes or say something outside the box.
Yeah, I'm doing my best to spread the word because it's as you know, this was self-published.
Yeah.
So I applied to and was accepted by the National Black Book Festival that was
Oh,
held this year in Houston, Texas. And
wow.
it was a joy. It was just and I had a woman there tell me, I've never met a white person who cared about this before.
Yeah.
So that was a
Honestly,
blessing.
it's a
Right. So,
blessing.
and
It's
if there are any
exceptional.
errors of interpretation, they're all mine, and I'd be delighted to hear from folks who said, no, you got that wrong. But that's why I reached out to make sure am I on target here? But it's been just one blessing after another all the way along. There was perhaps some surprise, as you noted, like, oh, you're
Yeah,
interested.
that's why I'd say it's
Yeah,
it's quite it's quite compelling. I want you to check out what has this person got to say or to write about this particular topic that pertains to a particular culture, about this particular people. So it's
right.
it's always awesome. Yeah, it's amazing. That's a great thing you've done, really. I need to commend that.
Well, thank you. Again, the eloquence is all in the Proverbs. The power is all in the Proverbs. But there are Proverbs on themes that we typically think of as Christian themes, like, as I said, loving your neighbor, also loving your enemy.
Yeah,
There is a glorious proverb from the Wolof people of Senegal
yeah,
about, if there is cause to hate someone, the cause to love has just begun. That is to look at everyone as a potential friend or ally.
mm,
Isn't that what Jesus was asking us to do? To reconcile everyone. There are themes about welcoming the stranger,
mm.
about reconciliation. That I think have been overlooked. So it's again, I can talk all day. And but you mentioned, like, why me, and
Yeah,
I don't have a really good answer for why me, but
yeah,
the African American writer Toni Morrison allegedly said something like, if you have power, use it.
yeah. Use it.
If you have like, I had the resources, I had the time, I had the interest, and so I did my best to sort of get some collaborators and put this out there.
Yeah, that's great. That's so amazing. And yeah, Chris, in case we have some viewers who are watching this interview and would like to get a copy of the book, on what platform is it available on for purchase?
It's on Amazon.com. Just search on the title, Legacy, Wisdom of African Traditions and the Bible, or my name, Chris Morehouse, Morehouse, just like the college in Atlanta that Dr. King went to. I'm not a Morehouse man, but or it's also in Barnes and Noble. It should be on the national versions of Amazon.
Mm,
In every country. I've
yeah,
checked a few. It's there. It's
yeah,
there, and I there's a paperback, an ebook that's a little bit cheaper, and there's an audiobook in production.
great. That's amazing. And I left a link in the discussion part of this interview where interested viewers can get a copy of Chris Morehouse books directly on Amazon and also on other platforms. So thank you so much, Chris, for accepting the invitation to be featured on P English Literature. It's awesome having this conversation with you.
Delighted. I'm so grateful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we know that we can go all day talking about it, but we have to end the interview.
Delighted. Again, it's been a joy. It's been another blessing. Thank you so much, Peter.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.